Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Aaron, for that beautiful reading from our wisdom literature. So, one of Reverend Judy's mentors was a professor at Andover Newton Seminary, a UCC pastor named Reverend Mary Ludy. Some of you might remember her. I think she's come to speak at First Congregational Church on a couple of occasions. She grew up in a very Catholic home and became a Roman Catholic nun for 20 years before she left that order and became a Protestant minister here in the Boston area. She tells the story of her birth that she wasn't supposed to be called Mary, but actually Janice, after her grandmother Janetta. But supposedly her mother had a really difficult time in birthing her. Ludy suggests that she always has had very broad shoulders, and that was the problem. But according to the family lore, Ludy's mother, as a good Catholic, had a strong devotion to Jesus' mother, Mary, and could be heard screaming at one point during the birth, "Okay, just get me out of this and I'll name her Mary." And that's how she got her name. Reverend Mary Ludy speaks of how struck she was when she first entered the Protestant church by how silent Protestants were on Mary. Other than a teenager dressed up as Mary during the Christmas pageant, she really isn't acknowledged much in our Protestant religious practice and tradition. But we, as a church, do have many former Catholics among us, as you know, and in our denomination, which is the UCC, the United Church of Christ. And there are many among us who even consider themselves still Catholic and yet have also found a faith home among us, which is a beautiful and appropriate thing, since we, as a denomination, seek to be a united Church of Christ. And we're committed to a philosophy that's articulated by the early reformer, which is in essentials unity, in non-essentials freedom or liberty, and in all things love. So even though we aren't in the practice of praying to Mary as Protestants, trust me when I say that we have among us devoted church folk who do in fact hold Mary, the Mother of God, as important in their lives. There would have been a time in our history where I, as a Protestant minister, might have enjoined you to smoke them out so we can correct their heretical ways. But then again, in those times and with those old and tired theologies, I wouldn't be your lead pastor either, since my wife is Catholic and my daughter's raised within both traditions, but are officially Catholic as well. I'd be the one smoked out. But thankfully, you and we are better than that, and we see the diversity among us as a blessing that enriches us rather than a threat. And so there is much to learn on this Mother's Day Sunday from our Catholic brothers and sisters, lapsed or not, who make a place for Mary in their spiritual lives. So we Protestants can tend to have a knee-jerk response to Catholic Marian theology that goes right back to the Protestant Reformation, understandably, when our forebears broke from the Catholic Church because we could stand no more for the mediator role that the Church was insisting on playing between us and God, between the believer and God. The Protestant claim that we are all priests, the priesthood of the believer, as it was known, was an insistence in the sacrosanct nature of a person and their relationship with God, and that no one, no priest, no bishop, no pope, no institution could come in the way of that, period. So the devotion to Mary as a mediator, then, of course, fell the way of other Catholic practices that in any way suggested that we didn't have direct access to God. So interestingly, in the Middle Ages, before the Reformation, the popularity of Mary and all the patron saints that surfaced in those centuries arose in response to what had become a too distant God contained by a too patriarchal and hierarchical church structure, such that even Jesus himself was set up on the throne, the perfectly holy Christ on a distant throne, inaccessible to the common man. So patron saints, figures of profound faithful lives, many women and men, became those to whom the common people turned to access this distant God. And there at the center of that large communion of saints sat Mary, Jesus' mother, known also therefore as the Mother of God. Protestants, we can tend to misunderstand Catholic teaching around Mary that she is an object of worship, which would rightly be problematic. But it's better understood that she is an object of devotion. One asks Mary to pray or intercede for you as you might ask a friend to pray for you. Even those of us who understand that we all have direct access to God find it important, don't we, and comforting to know that someone we trust and we love is praying for us, interceding for us. This is the role that Mary plays for many Catholics and Orthodox people, as well as some Protestants here and there. As the UCC scholar and professor of church history, Mark Burrows, says when he teaches about devotion to Mary in the Middle Ages, he said, "There's simply something very practical and very powerful about getting the mother involved." Yep, we all know that's true, don't we? And there's something very important that we should consider as Protestants. If it's not going to be through devotion to Mary, then how are we going to get the divine feminine involved? While the patriarchy of the church has no doubt co-opted Mary at times and used her as an example of the meek and mild and submissive woman who is defined only in relation to male figures, Mary, in Orthodox and Catholic teaching, has also mitigated the patriarchy and offered a more feminine access point to God, a point that we Protestants might envy. Even with many of our denominations open to having women ministers and priests, thank goodness, we've still been slow to break down the exclusively patriarchal language, imagery, and framing of the Christian faith in many of our churches. That's one reason why on Mother's Day Sunday, we wanted to emphasize the divine feminine in our scripture and our hymns and the testimonies that you've been hearing your fellow church members give, to remind ourselves of the importance of exploring feminine and not just masculine access points to God. And our mothers can help us do that. As I mentioned, my wife Tracy is a Catholic, and we've laughed sometimes about a couple of songs that we wooed each other with when we were first dating almost 25 years ago. I can just see our daughters rolling their eyes at the thought of these songs being part of our falling in love. Oh, brother. The one she talks about stirring her heart was when I was playing, early in our relationship, I was playing folk songs for her one night on my guitar, and then shared with her kind of out of the blue a scripture that I had set to music, Proverbs 3:4, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not upon your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge God," etc. And she was like, "Oh, be still my beating heart." And later in our courtship, Tracy, who isn't all that comfortable singing in public, as we sat in the car overlooking a beautiful Connecticut countryside, she sang for this Baptist born and bred boy the Salve Regina in all Latin. And I thought as I listened, okay, I'm marrying this woman. Many Catholics might know this ancient Latin song from the Middle Ages, but most of us born and bred Protestants don't. It's a lovely one that you really should hear. The way to hear it is in a beautiful chapel with 40 nuns singing it in unison to get the full effect of the Gregorian chant. But I thought I'd end my sermon with it to give you a sense of it. The words I find particularly poignant in this time of quarantine are the lines that go like this. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. Turn then, most gracious Advocate, thine eyes of mercy toward us, and after this our exile, show unto us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary. Whether we are Catholic or Orthodox or Protestant, Mary is a profound part of our tradition. And I think it's worth, maybe in our prayers, getting the mother involved. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve. Ad te clamamus, exules filii Eve, ad te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale. Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos, misericordes oculos, ad nos converte. Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende.